starting a brand new series today. I mentioned this last week, and I actually, because I preached this, I had slides from the first time around, and I didn't realize I'd actually captured. So I mentioned this, but I was sleeping, and I had a dream, and in a dream, and this very rarely happens, but in a dream, I saw me preaching, and you can understand why I wouldn't want that to happen. You know, that'd be really boring to see me preaching and dream about then have to go preach like my whole life. No. It hardly ever happens. But in this time I was preaching, and I said something in my sermon, and I woke up thinking, Preacher Mark, that was interesting. I wonder if that's even true, because most of my dreams, by the way, aren't. I get really weird dreams. And so I texted myself, and it looked like this. And this is the text. This is what I said in my dream. I said, we're not always anointed king like David. Sometimes we have to find our way like Esther. And I thought, I wonder if that's true. And I woke up and I read the book of Esther. It's not very long. I just read the whole book of Esther. And I thought, that actually is true. So it started this series called Finding Your Way. And today we're going to talk about one specific aspect of Esther's life. And this I think, applies to a lot of us. But what do we do when it feels like God is absent in our lives? You know, we've had those moments, maybe, hopefully, where you felt like God was right there. Like you'd feel His presence. I really felt like God was there. But then we've also had those moments, if you've been Christian for more than a day, when it's like, I haven't heard from God for a while. I just don't know that He's there. Or as my mom put it once, I feel like I say my prayers, they hit the ceiling, clunk, and fall back down to the floor. You've had those moments. So what do we do at that moment in our lives? And we're going to talk about that through the book of Esther, because Esther's an interesting book. It's controversial. Did you know that? I don't know if you knew that. Martin Luther hated it. He says, I am so great an enemy to the book of Esther, I wish it had not come to us at all. That's a pretty bad review. That's like a Yelp star, 0 stars or whatever. Would not recommend. And yet, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, who was an older rabbi, said this: when the Messiah comes, of course he didn't know the Messiah has already come, the other Hebrew books may pass away, but the Torah and Esther will abide forever. Like if there's only one part of the Bible left, it's going to be the Torah. That's the first 5 books of the Bible, which is where all the law is given, and Esther, and that's it. Man, well, that's a pretty wide range of opinions about Esther. What's the big deal? Well, part of the problem with Esther, when you take a look at it, is it has no mention of God ever in it. Not just Jehovah. There's no mention of God. There's never a prophecy given. There's never a dream. There's never a vision. There's no scriptures quoted. There's no Jewish law quoted. And there's no prayer that exists in the entire book. This is Holy Scripture? What kind of book is this? Why is that? We're going to talk about why that probably is. We don't know exactly. But so why is this such a glorious book to some people and some people hate it? And yet this is true. There's no mention of God in the entire book. Well, this takes place, by the way, in the same region that another book takes place, Daniel. In fact, it's a little bit of a sequel to Daniel in some ways. It happens about 50, 60, 70 years later, somewhere around there. We don't have exact dates. But so Daniel was written, of course, in Babylon. And Babylon, big fishes swallows little fishes, gets swallowed up by the Persian Empire. And so when Esther's in the same place, but now it's called the Persian Empire. And so that kind of sets up to me a little of a parallel between the two of them, because Daniel is this beloved book, that everybody loves, and Esther's this book with such controversy. And I think part of the reason is because Daniel, comes in the very first thing. Daniel is, he's making a stand. He's fighting to maintain his identity from the very moment that book starts. Of course, it starts with Nebuchadnezzar conquering Jerusalem and carrying Daniel and some of his friends away as slaves. That's how the book starts. And when they get to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar does what a lot of people do when they take people away, is they try to change their identities. Because if they're Jewish people, they're still going to hate me, but if they become Babylonians, they're going to love me, right? And so the very first thing he does is he gives them a Babylonian name. Belteshazzar, that's his name. But you'll notice it's the book of Daniel. And when Daniel writes it, he always says, I, Daniel. He never lost his identity as a Jew. In fact, the very first thing he fights over is Jewish eating traditions. They want to feed him from the king's table, and he says, I can't eat that food. And the guard says, you've got to eat that food. He says, no, just have fruits and vegetables and water. That's it. And they have a little contest. They said, look, just give me 10 days, and if I don't look good, then I'll eat your food, but just watch. Which means God had to step up. And that kind of happens all throughout the book of Daniel. He's making stands for God. And he's letting everybody know that he serves Jehovah. Even in Babylon, he serves Jehovah. And everything he has is coming from Jehovah. Then you get to the book of Esther. She not only never mentions Jehovah, she hides the fact she's Jewish. So you can see this contrast in the same place, in the similar circumstances. It seems so different. But I think that's a bit of an encouragement to us because neither Daniel nor Esther know if God's going to save them. This is something they have in common. They are surrounded by enemies, literally, and they do not know if they're going to die because of their enemies. Now, we have some people who oppose us occasionally, but I don't think any of us worry for our life. We have some issues with some people. And, the worst we get is a bad tweet or somebody said something bad also about us on Facebook or something, but they're actually literally worried for their lives, and they don't know that God's going to come through for them. And we know, because we know the story, but they don't. And that's different from David. If you remember when David fights Goliath, and he's coming forth to fight him, he's got his slingshot. That's all he has. He has a sling. He doesn't have a slingshot. He's a sling. It's different. He has a sling. He's got 5 stones. That's all he has. He's got no weapons on him at all. But watch what he says when he sees Goliath. He says this day the Lord's going to deliver you into my hands. I'm going to strike you down and cut off your head. How's he going to do that? He doesn't even have a pocket knife. He doesn't have a Swiss Army knife. He doesn't have one of those all-tool things. He's got nothing with which he can cut off a head because he has prophetically seen how this fight is going to go. And I think it happens to him while he's down at this river. I really think, because he doesn't know up above it, but when he goes down, he crosses the river, he stops, he gets 5 stones. I think in that moment God says, here's what's going to happen. I really think God laid it out to him because he tells it in detail. God has given him a vision. I'm going to cut off your head. He knows what he's going to do. He's going to use his own sword against him. That's how he's going to cut off his head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals. I'm going to kill you, your friends, and the horses you rode in on. I'm getting you all, he says. Right? This little tiny 15-year-old kid with a sling. Here's what I'm going to do. So that the whole world's going to know there's a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, because I don't even have one. But the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. He has a prophetic vision of exactly what God's going to do. Daniel doesn't get that. Neither does Esther. And I don't know about you, but I find that encouraging because I don't normally get that either. I'm kind of more like Esther, hiding my identity, than I am like David, shouting at giants. And we see that Daniel doesn't know. Because when Daniel is getting ready to be killed, this is a wonderful thing. So he's brought in, and he makes him a wise man. His job is wise man. That's a pretty cool business card, right? Daniel, wise man. I wouldn't mind having that wise, not wise guy. That's a different thing. This is wise man. I'm a wise man. And I go, oh, okay. How did you get so wise? I have a business card that says it. Look right there, right? I'm a wise man. That's a pretty good title. But the problem is he goes through training to become a wise man. And when he's graduating, just when he graduates, the wise men tick off the king. And the king gets so mad at him, he says, that's it, I'm killing all the wise men. And like Daniel's looking at his business card. It's like, I don't want this business card anymore. All wise men are dying. I didn't ask for this. But he goes to the guard and says, why is the king so mad? Before you kill me, can I ask? Why is he mad at me? And he says, well, the wise men, they all made him mad because he had this dream they can't answer. He said, can I see the king for a second before I get killed? So David went to the king and asked for time. Can you give me a shot? All your horses and all your men had a shot at. Can I get a shot? Let me just ask my God if I can do this. And he gets the time. But watch what happens. He returns to the house and explains to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. 3 guys you've probably never heard of because you know them by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But those are his good friends. See, he still refers to them by their Jewish name. He goes to them, he says, watch, he urges them to plead for mercy from God. He doesn't know that God's going to give him the answer. By the way, the answer is a good one because Nebuchadnezzar, he's smart. He had this dream that troubled him, and so he called all the wise men in, and he said to them, hey, can you tell me what my dream means? They said, sure, king, tell me your dream. We'll tell you what it means. He says, oh, no, I've seen you guys act. I'm not doing that. You tell me my dream, and then you tell me what it means. And they go, no one could do that. And that's when he got mad and wanted to kill them. So this is really a problem, right? And so he asks, please spend all night praying to God for mercy. They do not know God is going to act on their behalf. Before the famous time when these three guys get thrown into the furnace, Nebuchadnezzar is getting ready to throw them in and says, who's going to deliver you from my hand? And they said, well, I know our God is able. Maybe he will. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to do this. They don't know then. They don't know they're not going to be crispy chips by the time they're coming out. They don't know. This is the land they lived in. Listen, our relationship with God changes when we're surrounded by the enemy. They're surrounded by the enemy. We don't really know what that's like, but it changes. Now, his relationship with us never changes. He's still loving us and watching for us, but our relationship with him changes because it's hard to hear God through that kind of a surrounding. So now let's talk about Esther. So the book of Esther starts out not talking about Esther. She doesn't show up till chapter 2. The whole first chapter, it's talking about this king. So this is what happened in time of Xerxes. Now, Xerxes may be a name familiar to some of you who saw a movie several years ago called 300. That's this guy. That's who we're talking about, Xerxes. He's the guy who's going to eventually face off against the Greek in the Battle of Thermopylae. That's going to happen. But not yet. That won't happen for another 5 years. Okay, so this is what happened during the time of Xerxes, who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the third year of his reign, he was probably about 35 years old at this time, he gave a banquet for all of his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia, Media, the princes, the nobles, the provinces, they were all present, this big party. And what he does is he shows his wealth off. Look how rich I am. It takes days. They tore everything. Shows them their army and shows them the citadels and shows them how much money he has. And then it finally culminates in this huge feast that goes on for days. And when I say feast, I don't mean like a buffet in Vegas, like that you get all the seafood you want. I mean one of these feasts that they just keep bringing the food. Like you ever been in one of those Brazilian steak houses where they just keep bringing the food to you, so you don't have to get up or anything. And that goes on. Now, after a time, they've been drinking a long time. In fact, the king's command to each guest was allowed to drink as much as they wanted with no restrictions. And Persians can drink, apparently. They can really drink. He brought out all the wine. And it's now turning into a drunken party because it lasts for days. I can't even imagine what this is like. I couldn't eat that food for a day. But the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man whatever they wanted, whatever he wished. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other. And the royal wine was abundant in keeping with the king's liberality. So just as much as you can drink. So we have all these officials, all these men drunk off their saddles. And this goes on for days. Now, on the seventh day, they've been drinking for 7 straight days. That's a drunk. That's a long drunk. On the seventh day, when King Xerxes, I like how the Bible puts it, was high in spirits from the wine. Yeah, he was high, all right. He commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and the nobles, for she was lovely to look at. Now, can you imagine being Queen Vashti at this point? Hey, the king wants to show you off for a room full of his drunk friends. Like, okay, this is going to be good. And you know that she's like, really? I'm just a delicate little flower, and you're going to put me in front of all those men who are drunk, by the way? And big surprise, she has a different opinion of the matter. So when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. It's like, no, I am not going to be paraded around in front of a bunch of your drunk friends like some kind of a prize. I'm not going to do it. Now, Vashti is an interesting name, by the way, because it isn't necessarily Persian, and we don't really know where it came from. It would seem and appear that, especially based on what she just did, Vashti was probably a marriage that was prearranged for some kind of an alliance. And she knew her dad was going to protect her. And she probably didn't think too much of Xerxes either, apparently. And so we don't know the detail. The Bible doesn't go into it. But it appears as though that this is a political marriage, right? And she has no intention of letting herself be sullied by this. And the problem for Xerxes is he's right now gathering up armies. The whole purpose of this is so he can go invade Greece. So he's kind of in a political he's trying to get everybody excited about, look at this empire that we're pushing forward, which is why he's doing this. But he needs them. He needs all these people. That's why we're doing this. So they'll send armies so that he can invade Greece. That's what's going on here. So he really can't have Vashti's father pull out. So he's got a problem because he's showing off in front of all his friends and his queen's not playing his game, right? So they have a meeting. Now, it was customary for the king to consult experts in the matters of law and justice. I can imagine this. I see Dudley Moore in this with drunk, kind of sitting there. What are we going to do about this? They have a drunk council now. They all get together, these men. What are we going to do about this? He said, according to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? She has not obeyed the command of the king Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. So we have a real problem here. Our woman's gotten uppity on us. I don't know what's happening, right? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then one of the members, maybe the one who hadn't been drinking as much, says, actually, this is a real problem. She's done wrong not only against the king, but against all the nobles. Listen now, he's saying this Vashti's conduct is going to become known to all the women. and they're going to say, they're going to despise their husbands. When the husbands try to say, make me a sandwich, they're going to say, you know what? When King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, she didn't come, so make your own sandwich. The Persian women of the nobility who have heard about the king's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles the same way. This isn't just your problem, king. It's become all of our problems. There's going to be no end to disrespect and discord. There's no telling what's going to happen if we start giving women this kind of power. We can't do this. Something must be done. So therefore, I got a solution to this. If it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree now, and let it be written into the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. So basically, the solution for not coming to see the king is she's not allowed to see the king.
Right.
That'll work, right? What kind of thinking is this? Well, that does work, of course, because she can't disobey that command. Not that she cares. She's got a palace. She's got her tenants. Okay, fine. Never to see that guy again. But, there were some advantages to having a queen. The king is reminded of when his fury had subsided. He remembered Vashti, what she'd done, what he decreed about her. He's like, So now I'm a little upset because now you don't have a queen. It's not so much fun. The guys have gone home and I'm all alone. It's not fun anymore. So the king's attendants propose, hey, why don't we do a search made for beautiful young virgins for the king? Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of the realm to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the city of Susa, and let them be placed on the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let the beauty treatments be given to them. And then, after they've gone through the beauty treatments, because, they'll be cleaned up. They have that, they need some cleanup. So when they're all cleaned up, then let the young women who please the king be queen instead of Vashti. And this advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. So basically,
it's the most dramatic season yet, because this time, everyone dies.
Okay. Bachelor Persia version. Here we go. We're going to have all of them up, and he's going to be sitting up there waiting for the beautiful woman. So finally, we move on to chapter 2, and we finally get to meet Esther. The whole first chapter is all about Xerxes and Vashti. Now, there was in the citadel of Susa, as it happens, a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, who had been carried off into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. So he was probably about the same age that Daniel was when he got pulled away, maybe a little younger. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had raised as his own because she had lost her father and her mother. Hadassah, of course, was her Jewish name. We know her by Esther. Now, I want to stop here because this kind of gets glossed over in the story of Esther a little bit. Because I want you to think about that. So Esther was raised as basically a slave. They're servants, they've been conquered, of Persia, and her parents died at a young age. It's hard enough to be a slave girl, but to have a slave girl with no parents means you go to the brothel or you beg on the streets. That was her fate. Fortunately, she had a cousin, not even a close relative, Mordecai, who adopted her as his own daughter. But this is hard And we talk about, sometimes we've had some bad things happen in our childhood. Don't think any of us had that happen. Both parents died and we were sold to slavery. Probably not on our list. But think about it, because we talk about what happens to young kids, when even just one parent's gone and how it affects them, right? But now think both parents are gone. I think they have nothing. They have nothing to look forward to. This is the world she grew up in, right? And so sometimes I think that we use our hardship as an excuse for why we act the way we act. Certainly that seems to be the way it goes. My dad was mean to me and didn't buy me that bike when I was 12, and now I can't work right. Whatever, all kind of things happen. I didn't get my participation trophy. Whatever, these hardships that we have. But this is real hardship, but as C.S. Lewis points out, hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. And the way she comes through this hardship shows who she is. It'll reveal her heart, and it comes out very clearly in the narrative. So the young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. I like the Bible puts these things in there. She's the whole package. She has a lovely figure, and she's beautiful. And I'll add another thing to it. She has a great heart. She's a bright light, one of these people who just simply come out of a rough circumstances, just bright. We had, when we lived in Texas, down about three doors down from us, there was an alcoholic family. The father was an alcoholic, and he was gone most of the time, and the mother was kind of not always there either, and she had kids, and one of them put himself into school, got straight A's, played football for the football team, went on to college on a scholarship. He ended up getting a doctorate degree. And the other one became like his parents. Same genetics, same environment, same situation. It happens all the time, right? But for some reason, one person just excels. Esther was that person. Even though she had every reason not to be, she wasn't. She had a good heart. And Mordecai had raised her as his own daughter when her father and mother had died. So when the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Hegai, including Esther. It isn't like Mordecai volunteered her for this. People had eyes. She's beautiful. And not only is she beautiful, there's something about someone who has a pure heart that's just attractive. People want to be with her. She's beautiful inside and out. Just one of those people. So she went in, she was entrusted in the palace to Hegai. Now this is a tough situation, because not only has she now been moved from the small little house of Mordecai where she's grown up and she knows people and she's managed to make a life for herself. Now she's ripped out of that too, and she's thrown into the palace. And by the way, don't get mad at me, women, but you put a group of women together, and there is backstabbing and conniving going on like you can't imagine. I mean, if you've ever watched that Bachelor show, which I did once, you'll see it, right? You'll see the backstabbing that goes on behind the scenes and all that. And that's nothing compared to this. Because the winner gets the prize. You're going to be the queen. And everybody else, they're just part of the harem. The queen's child gets everything after her, right? So this is a big deal. Do you know the backstabbing that's going on in that palace right now? And here's poor Esther thrown into the middle of it all. And she doesn't even have, good bona fides as far as nobility and family and things. She's just a street rat practically. And so now she's pushed into there. Do you know how they felt about her? Do you know how she must have felt? Do you know what most people would do in that situation, but not Esther? Because it says that she pleased Hegai and won him over. She got his favor because of her great attitude. She wasn't like the other ones. He instantly liked her, and he showed her favor. Being shown favor is a big deal. I've told this story before, but when Victoria and I got married, we didn't have an embassy in Ukraine, so she had to come through Poland, and she had to have what they call the exit interview. We've already gone through 7 months of dealing with the INS paperwork and stuff. They say, yeah, okay, I guess we'll let her come here on a K-1 visa, which means she had 90 days to marry me or go home. So no pressure. So we'll let you have 90 days to figure this out. But there was no guarantee, because this final exit interview, they're going to make sure that there was nothing phony about this. It was some kind of a human trafficking thing or something like that. So we had to have this, or that she wasn't, scamming me. Either way. So there's a final exit interview, and you don't know until you get that whether she can come out or not. But she has to act as though it does, and it's going to end that way because she may never be back, for all she knows. And so she has to say goodbye to all of her friends, all of her relatives. She has to pack up whatever she can carry. She has a 10-year-old boy at that time. And she's not allowed to bring any kind of jewelry or gold out of the country because they have prohibited it, except for what you wear. So every piece of jewelry she owned, she's wearing, and because you can't bring it out. They won't let you. It was a thing. Anyway, and she's going, and we have no idea if they're going to say yes or no in Warsaw. This is scary. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to let her do that alone, even though I am not allowed to participate in the exit interview, which is weird because I'm the one who speaks English, but I'm not allowed because I'm not the customer, my fiancée is. I fly to Warsaw to be with her. So we get an apartment in Warsaw, and we have an appointment with the INS in Poland at the U.S. Embassy, an appointment at 8:30. And I'm figuring, all right, well, our apartment's about a 5-minute walk from the embassy, so we'll leave here, we'll get there about 10 minutes before our appointment. Now, I live in Texas at the time. I don't own a pair of boots. I have cowboy boots, but I'm not wearing them. I'm wearing sneakers. And I have one coat to my name that's a winter coat. It's a leather coat. I have no gloves and no hat, and it's 10 degrees in Warsaw, Poland. And so I'm figuring, my wife takes one look, my fiancée at the time takes one look at me and wonders how I lived long enough to meet her. So, are you kidding me? You have what shoes do you have? But I think these will be fine. I'm going to walk there. It's 10 minutes. I got this. Well, we walk down for our appointment, and we find a line coming out of the U.S. embassies going up the sidewalk and sidewalk up this way here. And there must be 100 people for an 8:30 appointment. And I'm standing there on the sidewalk with my feet getting really, really cold, And I'm doing the math because the door's not opening very much. It takes time to do it. The inside, by the way, is packed. You can see through the windows. And so, oh my gosh, there's 100 people in front of us. Every interview is taking 10, 15 minutes. I'm doing the math. I'm going to be here for hours. All of a sudden, the loudspeaker goes, "Excuse me, you're in the coat." And everybody's looking like we're all coats, The black coat, okay? And there's just a few of us, but the black leather coat. Me? Yes, sir, you. Are you American? Must have looked like American. What the Polish people were smart enough not to have no boots. Are you American? Yes, I am. Please use the right side of the yellow line. We're all on the left side. So we step over to the right side, and we walk straight up to the building. There's nobody there. And as soon as we get to the building, there's and the door opens up, and we walk straight into the building. This is called finding favor, right? And as I'm walking and people are looking at me like they want to kill me, I'm like, my tax dollars paid for that. That's why I got, but I had favor in his sight, and oh, gracious God, I had favor in his sight. She would have brought me home with pneumonia if we hadn't. When she gets favor in his sight, this is what it's like. All of a sudden, please step to the other side of the line, Esther, because things are going to change. In fact, he provides her with the beauty treatments himself and instantly moves her to the head of the line. He says he assigned her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moves her and all of her attendants into the best place in the harem. She goes right to the front. This is God's hand in her life, but it's also her response because of her heart. If she went there like all the other women had gone there, she had been treated like all the other women. But because of who she was, and God knew she was, which is why he ordained this whole thing to be there at that moment. Do you understand that God chose David to fight Goliath because of his heart? Not because of his skill, because of his heart. He chose Esther to do what she's doing because of her heart. The only difference is he told David he was doing it. Esther had to figure it out on her own. I don't know. That's encouraging to me. Because I haven't had Samuel show up with a bottle of oil and pour it over my head and tell me I'm going to be the next king. Sometimes we have to find our own way, right? And even when he's quiet. Now, of course, this last little thing is Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to. Don't do that. There'll come a time when she does. But she's even hiding her identity, and that's okay. This is all part of God's plan. Now, we may not always see God's hand, but he's always working behind the scenes. We have to believe that. If we don't believe that, are we really even saved? Do we really believe in God if we don't believe he's working behind us, right? Isaiah puts it this way. He says, truly you are a God who hides himself, O God of Israel, the Savior. Wow. You're a God who hides himself. He's a big God, but he can make himself look invisible. He does that sometimes. And there's reasons for it. My father said one of the most profound things that I've ever heard. It was on the occasion that Emily was being christened. My daughter Emily is adopted. I don't know if you know that. It's a miracle story how she became adopted. I should probably share it someday. But we adopted her at a very young age, and we were excited about it. You know, I went from being empty nester to having a kid in like a week. Our gestation period was a week. I wasn't ready for that. Anyway, so what do? Well, you have to get him christened because I was raised Presbyterian, and that's what we did in the Presbyterian church. And who's going to christen her? Well, I'm going to have my father, a Presbyterian minister, do it. I'm going to do that. So we actually came back home to Pennsylvania. I was living in Texas, and came back home, and we went to Little Tiny Sutersville Presbyterian Church. At the time, it was barely even operational, but we asked if we could use it. They said yes, and so we had this little service there. And during the service, the pastors, they talk a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed. And so my father talked a little bit, and then he said this. I thought this was great. God's hands are always moving in our lives, and every now and then, he lets them linger long enough for us to see them. And that would describe my life, right? His hands are always moving, but I haven't always seen them. And sometimes I don't know God's hand was there until later. I look back on it and said, oh, yeah, God was there. Like Jacob, surely God was in this place, and I knew it not. Sometimes that's how it works in our lives. But small obedience today will lead to great purpose tomorrow. And that's what God tells us. What are you going to be obedient to? In case of Esther not having a prophet tell her what to do, she was obedient to the one man she loved and trusted, Mordecai. So she stayed obedient to him. He was like her father, right? So she said, I'm going to be obedient to Mordecai. So last thing he says before she goes away, he probably said, be you. I'm sure he probably said that because he knew she was wonderful. Just be you, but don't tell him you're Jewish. Okay, I won't. And so she's obedient to that because God's plans are always at work. Proverbs says this, the heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. You're all here today because you think you brought yourself here. You had your reasons for coming. I don't know what it was. Maybe see some friends. Maybe that's what you do on Sundays. Maybe whatever. You had your reasons for being here, but I want you to know something. God had a reason for you being here too. Right? He's involved in this. Your life is not alone. Your life is part of what he's doing too. So yeah, you planned your way, but God established your steps. He's why you're here instead of someplace else. Here's a great quote from Corrie ten Boom. God is never late, but he is rarely early. Amen. I have noticed that about God. In fact, I think you could say never. Because if he's early, we'll take it for granted. He wants us to come every day for our daily bread, right? Give us this day our daily bread. Don't give us this monthly bread because then we'll forget him. He gave manna every day because he wants you to look to him every day. He knows who we are. He knows if he comes early, before the deadline, we'll think it was us. He's always right on time. See, God's plans are always at work. We talked about this verse last week. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. You can't leave out those last two things. You have to love the Lord. You have to be working for his purpose. But when those two things are true, everything works for good. Not just everything God does, everything everybody does. Joseph's brothers tried to kill him. That worked together for God's purpose and for Joseph's good. It doesn't matter who did what. God's going to work it all out. Even if you screw up, even your mistakes, God can take them and work with them. Don't worry, as long as you love him and you're working for his purpose. Those are the two things that are key here. You can't go off and doing your own thing expecting all things to work out. But we have that. Now what is faith then? What are the faith we're talking about? Daniel and Esther and probably us, we don't have prophetic words to govern our lives. God's silent sometimes. What do? We stay faithful to what we know. God has spoken to us in the past, either through scripture or whatever. We have something he told us to do, but he stopped talking to me, so what should I do? Keep doing what he told you until he tells you the next thing. It's pretty simple, right? You just take to the next step. You listen and you do the next step. You don't run ahead. You wait. God will tell you the next thing. Until then, keep doing what he's already told you to do. It's kind of simple, kind of how we treat our kids, right? I mean, when they're babies and they're little, you tell them everything. You tell them every step of the way. But when they get older, you expect them to know some things. You expect them to be able to do things on their own, you know? You expect to be able to say, go wash your hands for dinner and not have to walk in there and turn on the faucet and put their little hands under the water and take the soap and do that and put them back under the water, right? You expect that. And when you see them walk back out with dry hands, you go, what? What were you doing? I wash them. Your hands are dry. I dried them. No, you didn't. Get back in there, wash your hands again, right? If we had this, it was just me. I've had that discussion, right? My daughter once came out with one hand washed because we were having Kentucky Fried Chicken. I said, get back in there, wash your other hand. We expect that, right? I told you this. We've shown you this. You know how to do this, so do it. Why do I have to keep telling you all the time? Sound familiar, parents? Why do I have to keep telling you this? You know this. We've discussed this. This is God. He spoke to you. Why does he have to keep telling you? You know this. See, the thing is that faithfulness is obedience without guarantees. See, we want to be faithful to God if he guarantees if we're faithful, it's going to do this. Oh, I'll do that, God, but then you have to do this. No. When I was in the hospital dying of pneumonia in both lungs, 13 months old, this is the book, those of you who have it, I was dying, and my mother felt God was telling her, give him to me. Like, dedicate him to me. Doctor had already left. Doctor told her before he left, I don't expect your son to be here in the morning. You know, medical science literally had just checked out. My mom, early Christian, crying, trying to figure out what to do, and felt God was saying, give him to me. So she calls Mrs. Curry, her spiritual mother, and says to Mrs. Curry, what should I do? She says, well, I think you should give him to God. I think that's what you should do. And she says, okay, I'll do that. What does that mean? It means you take your hands off him and say, God, do whatever you want with him. And she says, and that means he's going to heal him, right? She goes, no, that doesn't mean that God's going to heal him. It means that you've told God, do whatever you want with him. And she says, but he's got to heal him, right? And she says, honey, he's God. He doesn't have to do anything. That's the point, right? Faith is obedience without guarantees. Guarantees is called bargaining. That's making a deal. That's not faith. Faith is when I'm going to do what God told me to do, even though I don't see how it's going to help. Daniel had just watched Jerusalem be conquered, his people killed, and pulled off into slavery. And he and his friends in that cart dragging him to Babylon to be a slave and probably a eunuch. We don't know for sure, but probably. They all told themselves, whatever we do, we are not going to disobey Jehovah. The God who just failed to protect Jerusalem? How is that going to go well for you? We see what just happened to the rest of the Jews that stood up in Babylon and decided to stick with. How is that going to go well for you? They said, this is who we are. We're Jews. We serve Jehovah. And no matter what we do, we're not going to disobey him. And that's how they live their lives. They didn't know the book of Daniel was being written. They didn't know Daniel was going to live long enough to write it. Esther has no idea what's going to happen in her life. Oh, by the way, I have to point this out. We have a tendency to look at Daniel as this great thing, and Esther is this kind of just a pretty girl with a face. Esther's life is still celebrated to this day in a festival called Purim. There is no festival for Daniel. Let me give you another one. Daniel, because of his faithfulness, saved himself and his friends, and add this to his list of resume, he also converted Nebuchadnezzar into a follower of Jehovah. That's pretty good. Esther saves the Jewish nation. So faith is obedience without guarantees. God knows who he's putting there, and he doesn't have favorites when it comes to his heroes. For faith is the assurance of things hoped for and conviction of things not seen. Are you convinced there is a God? Are you convinced that God is there? And you're convinced that God has told you what to do? Keep doing it. It's wavering back and forth and back and forth that's the problem. We need to stay on the path God sets us and trust that he's going to get us to the next place too. See, your faith is very often revealed by what you do when you don't hear God's voice. We always think the other one. When God speaks, if I obey, that shows you my faith. Yes, that does. But your faith is also shown by what you do when you don't hear his voice. This is called faithfulness, stubborn faith. We can be stubborn, right? I can be stubborn. Just ask my wife. I can be stubborn. But I need to be stubborn in my faith, right? I'm just going to be stubborn right now. I'm going to be stubborn in my faith. I'm going to continue to do what God called me to do no matter what. It's easy to quit. It's easy to blame God for why you quit. I was doing it, God, but you know what? Life got hard. Where are you? I'm out. It's easy. But Jesus says, will there be any faithful left on earth when the Son of Man returns? Faithful is full of faith. So the question is, what are you doing while you are waiting to hear from God? Would you all please pray with me? Thank